this ancient land did, by the use of plants and sunlight, produce everything that life needed automatically. And unfortunately, I think at that 40 odd years ago, I could see that we could all take advantage of it. It was quite different to what a lot of us were doing and a lot of agricultural systems were doing. And I just thought it'd be a simple method of saying, this is how it is, this is what it looks like, and it would all happen. But however, I think with these people we're gathering today, the simple pieces will happen. If they don't, I'm terrified of what the results could end up. Because I did see the landscape around Broken Hill disappear in 3 hours simply because the mines had burnt the trees around. We had a dry spell, and then a thermal storm just destroyed everything. And so I know the environment has its ability to fight back and teach us lessons that we needed to learn then, and hopefully we can learn as quickly as possible. Then, of course, I had the very wet period of the 60s. We've got that again, I believe. This is our opportunity. This is our free, get out free card. But we all need to understand it won't happen if we don't help it, because we've made such a mess of fiddling around in the last, well, even 200 years. But the issue then is the evidence of what failed and why it failed is easily identified, and in enough places the solution, which is what I hope we all carry away as quickly as possible under the most careful analysis and scrutiny that we can definitely do today.
So the Whole of Landscape Alliance already exists. There is a group of people who've been working in landscape projects for like decades, and it's a frame that we can all come together on, because it doesn't belong to anyone, it belongs to all of us, and it plugs into a global conversation. In the landscape approach, it's looking at how do we restore from paddock to planet, from small scale to massive scale. And you see the same patterns of regeneration throughout the landscape. And this is life overcoming entropy. And that's the whole principle underneath biogeomorphology. It's about life creating feedback loops that grow landscapes that are living and healthy and resilient. So that's what whole of landscape means for me. And it takes a whole of community effort. It's not about one person leading, and the leadership needs to be servant leadership.
But to me, it's like looking at it. If we all step into our roles, if we all actually think, well, what can I actually do to be involved deeper in true restoration of the climate, true restoration of the water, food, and our resources? I think we're kind of getting used to quotas and to ticking boxes and to working based on projections of what has been. But I feel like this new paradigm is about moving into what has been, learning from it, and taking that understanding into what can be. What's next? Because do we want to be fighting for these same, situations in another 10 years? Against hotter fires, against more extreme floods? I personally do not. I want to be able to see a balanced climate, to have good, healthy immune systems of the people on the planet, and to just have access to clean running water and to good, healthy food, not genetically modified food all the time. Shouldn't have to be so crazy. Okay.
To understand, to get started in anything, we need to first understand how it operates, because if we don't understand how it operates, we'll just continue the current practices we see today, which is most of the time pillaging our landscape and seeing the results that we see now of periods of drought, fire, and flood, all of which are becoming more and more extreme. But to overcome those, we need to understand, it doesn't need to be the complexities, but the simplicity of how our landscape operates as one piece, and then how we can manage that alongside our current farming practices that not only increases our productivity as farmers or as land managers, but also restores the system, gets our water cycle, our carbon cycle all operating as it should once again, and restoring the climate as a whole and our ecosystems. But yeah, first and foremost is being able to understand how our landscape operates, the simplicity of that, reading it, and then how you can manage whatever you're doing on top of that alongside nature.
We are all part of the landscape. So we are country. I think it's, everyone here on this tonight would have witnessed or participated in a welcome to country. Well, what is country? Then from an Indigenous perspective, we are country. And this is one of the points that I was making in the way that we think about the environment. The Western world has sort of, its law is enacted in state doctrine, where our law is linked to the natural world. And so in one sense, you have power over creation, so that when you think about that, it places humanity outside the natural world. If your power is in creation, then you're part of it. You're part of the natural world. So you're actually in there. So it is really essential that in understanding that we treat everybody, humanity, everybody else, as being part of the environment.
The whole essence of a lot of modern Western law is universalism. And that's good if you're arguing for universal human rights, but it's not good when you're trying to care for country. And, the message, the constant amazing way that Indigenous people talk about their place and local place, and however you term it, whether it's Western bioregion or local territory or cultural landscape, it's all unique to local place. And a lot of what we bang on about is how do we shift our governance systems and ultimately our legal systems to embed caring for place in a very odd Western culture that doesn't understand, at that high level, and institutional level, how to connect and how to care for the uniqueness of a place. So that's what I get excited about.
If you're going to regenerate something, you would look at, I think just fairly logical, you would look at where it worked best and where it once worked and functioned at its optimum. And then you would try and work out how you could mimic that or replicate that as best as possible. Unfortunately, it's not part of the paradigm of thinking at this current time, because this process of I don't know, I guess man's hubris, where he thinks he knows better than nature all the time, and disconnects from nature because of that. And then the ego gets in the way, and then the need to be right, and then the money gets in the way, and everything else gets in the way, and we end up with what we've got. So we have to contend with that, and we have to work with it, but still retain the essence of what it really once was. And so that's my view of how I see it, and that's how I use it as the blueprint in my thinking.
Our plan is to see a whole of Shire regeneration of the Wingecarribee landscape. So we want to see our soils being more fertile, so our food's more nutrient dense and healthier for us eating it. Our producers can get higher prices for better quality produce. And, we want to see our land given more of a chance to mitigate the effects of floods, like at the moment, or in a couple of years' time, drought again and bushfires. So, but we also see, as was just mentioned, this incredible capability to capture vast amounts of carbon. And from an emissions point of view, for our Shire, if we were to transition, say 50% of the rural land within our Shire to landscape regen, and we were able to capture even 2% of extra carbon in the soil, we'd be capturing the equivalent carbon emissions to the entire emissions that we have in our Shire at the moment, that we're emitting at the moment. So yeah, I guess that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Well, Mem, we need 3 levels of government on board. I've started with, the mayors, the councillors, the state member, the federal member. They're not saying no, but we actually do have to prioritise this work, which is the highest priority we have to do as a country, as a society, or as a region. It's the most important thing we have to do.
We're dealing with a degraded landscape. We're dealing with a situation where we have changed what was there. And what I like about the whole of landscape is that we have to include the whole of a catchment for a creek, not just a farm. And we have to include also what's happening in the cities, because we all live in the cities. We all want to make the water run faster and faster and faster. And yet what is being said for regenerative farming needs also to apply to the cities, and we need to regenerate what we're doing in the cities.
For me, the whole of landscape means living in harmony with all life that lives, not just, you know, within this country, but how that extends across the globe, because we are one living, breathing planet, you know. And it for me feels like, you know, taking from what you've each spoken to today, reading the landscape, reading the land, having the country speak to you in a way that you can support it as it supports you in your life. And
beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm like, so many, all parts of me are just feeling so alive, knowing that this alliance is here and is developed, not just in development. And, you know, all of me also knows that we're going to do this.
When I was a chemical farmer, I used to go out and kill everything and plant a couple of improved species. And the big thing I learned was that those species generally died and the stock didn't like them. And now that I encourage the biodiversity, we've got 80 different species in our pasture and probably billions of species in the soil, because that's the bit we really don't take into account when we're poisoning everything on the top of how we're killing everything underneath. So the whole of landscape for me is understanding how everything works together as a holistic approach, from the soil, the plants, the animals, to healthy food, to then healthy humans, and then incorporating the communities, the art. I'm up here with Jill Sandbrook. We're doing an art project, so getting artists, writers, poets all involved to spread the word and get the whole community understanding, because for me the ultimate is in that biodiversity, getting that nutrient density in your food. Once people start to understand that, then you know, the ultimate thing I think is that farmers get paid for nutrient dense food, then everything's on a good play.
Well, we would like to help as many good people that understand Peter's work as much as possible. I think if we can get scale, investors get more interested. It's really interesting. You have a project that's, you know, a few $100,000, I'll say, oh, it's not even worth looking at. But what we want to achieve is hundreds of millions of dollars in this sector. So let's work together. Let's collaborate, because it is our biggest chance to resolving our climate crisis. And the answer's there, and we just got to do it. But we got to connect that funding. And I think if we get the scale, I think that will help in terms of getting the investment as well.
Even the most experienced person that we have in this is still learning. So my big vision would be that we had a landscape person in every town, like your local agronomist. But if we work together as a group, we can actually help restore the water in the soil. And we put water in the soil, it slows, it moves, but it still moves slowly. It moves fertility. It rehydrates the land. It moves fertility from the top to the bottom. And a small amount of fertility on the top can have an amazing effect further down the hill.
Well, I suppose the first place to start is to get out in the landscape, whether that's your backyard, your property, anywhere in the forest. Get in touch with nature, begin to observe, open your eyes and actually have a look at the landscape that you're living in around you is probably a big part. The second thing I would say, if someone's wanting to get practical in what they can do, is plant a plant. We talk about that. PA says that all the time. if you want to make an impact and plant a plant, let something grow that's green and growing and play its part in the small water cycle, which we were just talking about then, which is extremely important to our landscapes functioning. And yeah, that, and yeah, always be willing to learn, get out, find anything that you can do to get learning and play your part in the bigger, broader scheme to get rolling.
Everyone who has a desert needs to attend to the evidence that this landscape contains, because it is the comeback king from desertification. So it did it automatically, and it was done by plants. And if you're taught how to use the plants, we can't be, that's more stupid than a group of plants. So we have to learn how to put them together.
Oh, just thank you for all of the effort and energy that you've all put into your industries to make this world a better place. It's my honor to have emceed tonight, and I hope you guys all have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mim. And I'd also like to thank very much Uncle Phil, Peter Andrews, Hamish, B, who's down there in the shed holding the space for us, Antoine, and everyone that's joined us tonight to hear an Indigenous perspective on landscape restoration and how it brings more than just fixing a landscape, but changing the way that we relate with landscape and seeing the spirit involved as well. And it's something that I think has been missing from a lot of conversations around anything regenerative or restorative. And so having those opinions coming together is really special. Thanks everyone again for being here tonight. And with that, we'll say good night.